Duke fans, hello and welcome to episode number 225 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Hope you guys are staying safe out there and that you enjoyed the weekend. And to all our listeners in Louisiana, it looks like you're going to get hit with a double dose of hurricanes this week. So we send you all the best and hope you are out of harm's way. Donald Wine here. I am the host for this episode, still in Texas with my family, and will probably be here for another week plus as we attempt to move forward with life. And many thanks to all of you who reached out after last week's episode. I sincerely appreciate all of you for your well wishes and your condolences. You know who else I appreciate? My two co-hosts who are also here with me. First, Sam Klein is in Massachusetts. Hello, my friend. How's it going up there?
It's good. I'm recording from my new apartment in Boston. So if it's echoey, it's because I am recording while sitting on my mattress in a room that otherwise has no furniture. So the ceiling or the walls look very big right now because I'm basically sitting on the ground all the time. I think, have a bed arriving this week, so I might return to some semblance of normal. I am also drinking a canned seltzer water. So whoever's editing this episode, please get rid of the burps if you wouldn't mind. And otherwise, I think I'm free of logistics. But it's very exciting to be back with you guys. And I think today we might just talk about basketball.
Yeah, I think we might. And here's the thing. People on the podcast who are listening can't see this, but we can see this because we can see each other. And you got to get some stuff on your walls. I know that's like usually the last thing that people do.
Yeah, wait.
Your walls are pretty bare.
People should see literally Sam is sitting in front of a completely white background.
Yeah,
it is. It's very
weird, but it's like you moved in.
Oh, but you guys can't see, but now you will. I also have a white blanket.
Oh, there you go.
And some white pillows.
Okay,
there are some blue sheets.
Thing.
Yeah. It's sort of it makes the space look bigger.
Yeah, it does.
Which is something I need as an extremely small person. I need the space around me to look very large.
Awesome. And by the looks of it, we have Jason Evans with us, and he appears to be still enjoying vacation. Am I right, Jason?
You are correct, sir. Yeah, at the Jersey Shore. By the way, I had some pizza. If you've ever been to Ocean City, New Jersey, there is a place on the Ocean City Boardwalk called Three Brothers from Italy Pizza. And
I've had said pizza.
Three Brothers from Italy makes this pizza that's about 18 feet across. It's huge. My family of four, including my two adult sons, can eat a lot of pizza. And we order one of these pies, and it's so good. I mean, like, there are puddles of orange stuff that I don't want to identify exactly what it is. I think it's just a huge puddle of orange grease right in the middle of your slice. It's the most delicious thing ever. It's probably horrible for me, but God, it's good.
Welcome to our program where Southerners talk about Northern food with astonishment.
Wait, we're going to do barbecue? I can do barbecue.
Oh, no. That's we're going to have the own special Duke versus Kentucky podcast where we talk about nothing but barbecue. But this week, we're going to talk about basketball because we had some big news that hit the world over the last week. We're going to begin with the biggest news, and it was a major get for the Duke Blue Devils. The number 3 player in the ESPN 100 for the class of 2021, Paolo Banchero, announced that he will be joining the Brotherhood next season and play at the Gothic Wonderland. Banchero is a 6'8", 230-pound center from Seattle and is the second player from the class of 2021 to commit to the Blue Devils, joining A.J. Griffin. Jason, I will begin with you first. Tell us about Paolo Banchero and what he is going to bring to next year's team.
So before I get to what he's going to bring, I want to talk about the fact that this is something that just doesn't happen in recruiting. This was a huge shocker, a huge surprise. Duke has been involved with Bahn-CARE-o for a while, but no one expected him to commit at this point. There was no, most of these guys, they go, oh, here's my list of 10, here's my list of 5, here's my final 3, and they're laying it out over the course of time. Banchero hadn't done any of those things. It was just out of the blue that he committed. And the fact that he committed to Duke was even more surprising. Both of his parents were athletes at University of Washington, and he was considered to be a major UW lean. Now, he's good friends with Kennedy Chandler, a point guard prospect that Duke had been after. And when Chandler committed to Tennessee just about a week ago or so. And a lot of people thought that Banchero and Chandler would be a package deal and that Tennessee would get Banchero. So first there was this Washington talk. Then it was Tennessee. Kentucky has been pushing hard on this kid. This is a really good player, as I'll discuss in a moment. But no one was picking Duke. We've been involved. We were talking to him, of course, but no one expected this to happen. And then out of the blue, he just says, hey, I'm committing, and it's the Duke Blue Devils. So huge surprise in every aspect of the recruitment. But wow, what a major get for Duke. This is a extremely talented player.
Jason, the surprise nature of this commitment kind of reminds me of the Zion Williamson commitment from a couple of years ago, where there were other schools that were, I think in Banchero's situation, it wasn't as clear between Tennessee, Kentucky, Washington, which of them was necessarily the front runner. There were kind of arguments for all of them, but for Zion, it was like, he's going to Clemson. Everyone kind of knows this. It's just a formality at this point. And then bam, the news changes. Is that how you felt when you heard that the Duke was able to land this prospect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great comparison. I want to point out, Banchero is not sort of the social media phenomenon that Zion Williamson was. So there wasn't, and Zion had announced when he was going to announce. It wasn't like a surprise announcement that came out of nowhere. But yeah, in terms of where, this was another case of a kid Duke was involved with, but not considered to be the leader on, and we got him. So I think that's a perfect comparison and very apt.
I was going to say, when it comes to the comparison, that was the first thing that I thought of, but this feels more surprising to me because at least Zion, we had an announcement date. We knew what his top 3 or 4 were. This one, it was just like, you could have missed it. Like, I was scrolling on Twitter and was just like, wait, back up. What does that say? He committed to who? It was like that surprise. It was like out of the blue when Jason mentioned that, he means it. It was something that literally, if you weren't looking for it, you would have missed it, and it would have been okay to miss it because it was that quick.
It's not a time of year when we expect big commitments to be happening, right? I mean, obviously the pandemic is changing the schedule a little bit, but coaches are not able to visit prospects right now. So it's not like Banchero's been able to see the Duke staff anytime recently. His high school, sometimes there's a little wave of commitments that happen right before the high school season begins, when players are like, you know what, it's my senior year. I know who I'm going to commit to. I just want to get it over with. So they'll make that announcement maybe September, October before their season starts. But right now, high school seasons are all in jeopardy anyway. So it's not like that soft deadline is imminent for him. So this was, as you said, Donald, the timing was surprising, not just because it was a surprise that he came to Duke, but this is not a time of year when you expect a lot of commitments. So yeah, I was the same way, where I saw the announcement on Twitter and I was like, wow, I remember hearing about him and knowing that he was one of the very top players in the class, did not think that his announcement was going to come so out of the blue like that.
Well, and the other thing about the announcement, and I promise folks, we're going to get to what kind of player he is in just a moment. But the other thing about the announcement is, this was a really low-key announcement. Like, a lot of kids produce, or they have someone produce a splashy video that announces things for them. A lot of kids, look, a kid like Banchero could have easily gone on ESPN to make the announcement, at least ESPNU to make the announcement live. All he did was post a really simple, very rudimentary, like, he said, I'm committed to, and then it just flashed up on the screen, Duke. And like, with a couple, animated things of him in a Duke uniform. But, in this social media age of guys producing slick videos and having really fancy announcements, this was very low key. And I like that out of the kid. He's about getting the job done on the court. He's not about building this big, huge brand or all that other kind of, extraneous stuff. So let's get to what he's like on the court. Like Donald said, 230 pounds. He is a solid player. Power forward or center. I really think at Duke, he's probably going to be a stretch 5. I don't think you're going to see him playing much power forward, but he has the skills. The NBA comparison on him is to be a power forward. He is extremely skilled for a guy his size, has a good outside shot, doesn't shoot a ton of threes yet. Looks like he has the kind of stroke that could make it, but I mean, he pulls up from inside of 15, forget it. It's going down. He's got a very, very good shot. His ball handling skills are outstanding. This is someone who's capable of putting the ball between his legs when he's dribbling, juking guys. He makes great passes. He is really, really known for being an outstanding passer for a guy his size. Likes to get the ball in the high post where he can do a lot of different things with it, looking for teammates. There's some highlight films I've seen of him making, like blind behind the back passes and stuff. This is a highly skilled player who comes in a physical package, 6'8", 6'9", 230 pounds, where he can play a lot of different positions, and he's quick enough on the floor that he has been known to guard, like in high school, he guards the opposing team's best player. If their best player is a point guard, he guards the point guard. If their best player is a center, he guards the center. This guy can do a lot of different things on the floor. Duke fans, this is a big, big deal. This guy is going to be a huge impact freshman for the 1 year we get him. And yes, it'll be 1 year. He is an absolute one and done candidate.
Jason, I'm glad that you highlighted the passing, because I think that's a huge component for him. You can get a big who's 6'9" in high school and just bigger than everybody else on the court. And yes, he's going to have lots of dunks. And if he is coordinated enough to run down the floor, he will have breakaways. And that's all well and good. The little bits of highlights that I've gotten to watch on Banchero tell me that he's a much smarter player than just your standard huge big man. He made a comment I think it was to Paul Biancardi at ESPN, about how Coach K wanted to compare him to Shane Battier, which obviously gets us and any other Duke fan excited if we have more Shane Battiers coming down the line. Duke has had some success in the last few years with passing bigs. Jalil Okafor was a good passer. Marvin Bagley, of course, was a great passer. So it's not like Coach K doesn't know how to use a player like this. And being able to pass, especially out of the high post as a big, is going to be really important for Banchero to be a star on the team, because it's one thing if you can bottle up a big who is just down low, but if he can roam around in space and use all that size, he's going to be really dangerous no matter what team he plays on. So I'm glad that he is playing for Duke.
Yeah, the versatility is what stood out to me. He, we saw a lot. When you hear the word center, you're thinking this guy's just planted in the post, but he can shoot the three very well. He, like you said, he can pass, he can run the floor, he can dribble, he can do a lot of things. And I think that versatility and that ability to be able to play anywhere is what Coach K was telling him that he can do, that, the offense is going to be open for him to do his thing in the places that he feels comfortable doing them in. But one thing that I will note as we close this out is he did say on that Instagram live that you mentioned, Sam, that he was going to work on recruiting Patrick Baldwin, who is number 2 in the class, and Trevor Keels, who is a shooting guard out of Fairfax, Virginia, number 15 in the class. Keels, I should note, goes to the same high school as Jeremy Roach did, who was entering his freshman year. So I think he's about to get the full court press and the full weight of the brotherhood recruiting him over the next couple of months. It'll be great if we can land those two to kind of round out this class and make it one of these classes that are on the lines, maybe not as hyped, but on the lines of that class that featured Zion, Cam Reddish, and RJ Barrett.
Yeah, I have to tell you, if we get Patrick Baldwin to go with Banchero and Griffin and then Trevor Keels, it is very similar. I mean, very similar in terms of the positions that they play and the type of roles that they would play. It is very similar to what you saw when Duke landed, the truly incredible Zion, RJ, Cam Reddish, and Trey Jones class.
And headed into next season, Duke expects, I think, the cupboard to be a little more full, because there are a lot more guys coming in this season who, and we'll talk about this, I think, a bit when we get to Matthew Hurt's development, but there are a lot of guys on the team this year who are freshmen who are not expected to be one and done. That percentage is much lower. So more guys who are going to stick around to help those, the sort of next crop of superstar guys fill in really well. So as excited as I am for the 2021 season that we hopefully get to play, 2022 is going to look awesome for Duke, even just with the start that we have now.
Sam, you brought it up, and we're going to switch right into it. We're going to turn next to Matthew Hurt. Duke men's basketball has been in the middle of summer workouts for a few weeks now, and in pictures and videos last week, they showed a Matthew Hurt that has gotten noticeably bigger. And when someone on Twitter noticed that and shouted it out, we got a response from Matthew Hurt's dad, who responded and mentioned that Matthew had went back to Duke at 240 pounds. For reference, he was listed at 214 last season. Furthermore, his dad went on to say that Matthew had gotten up over 50,000 shots since the end of March, which is a great thing. Now, Duke Blue Planet is the best of the biz. They've been putting out video clips for the last couple of weeks of the guys as we get to know this Duke team. But Sam, I want to start with you. I checked, and the nearest cookout to Rochester, Minnesota is Frankfort, Kentucky, which is 694 miles away. So he gained 26 pounds in another way. So what do you think of Matthew Hurt's bulking up? And you can also take that to talk about the shooting that we talked about, or anything else you've seen in the various Duke Blue Planet videos.
Hey, before Sam answers, how is Cookout not a sponsor of this podcast? Cookout, please sponsor our podcast. You can pay us in food.
Yeah, I will happily accept whatever you want to give. You gave me T-shirts, jerseys, food. I don't care. I really don't.
So, all right, then I guess if we're going there, let's start on the food angle. Have either of you been to Minnesota before?
I have.
1992 Final Four. Duke won the championship. I was there.
There you go.
I've been more recently than that. But
are you familiar with the Juicy Lucy?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I am not worried about people from Minnesota being able to put on 26 pounds in a summer, especially a summer where there's nothing to do.
They also have cheese curds up there. They're not as good as Wisconsin cheese curds, but they got those on the side.
I have a few friends from Minnesota. I find it a lovely place, but the eating is hearty. So I am not worried about Matthew Hurt being able to put on weight. This is, I wouldn't say unsurprising, because he obviously made it this far in life, not being this huge. But if he has put on weight that looks that good, this is amazing for Duke. Because last season, I think we saw flashes of what Matthew Hurt could be when he is fully filled out. Obviously, when you're 6'9" or 6'8" and only 18 years old, you just haven't had time to fill in that frame yet. He's a quick player. He is able to make shots from the outside. The size is going to allow him to force a lot of players to adjust to him when he's on defense, because you're not going to be able to get around him as easily if he's this big and still this quick. And then on offense, it's huge for him because he's going to be able to set some hard screens. With his skill set, being able to shoot, being able to set those high pick and rolls and then roll out for the 3-point shot or head to the basket with a full head of steam is going to be enormous for Matthew Hurt. Duke has one other post player coming in Jalen Johnson, I think, who's supposed to be competing for the highest number of minutes with Matthew Hurt in the post. But otherwise, the rest of the big men coming in should be firmly behind them in the rotation. So Hurt gets a lot of opportunities this year to be featured on offense. And if he is looking for that ticket to the NBA this season, his being able to maintain that size and play at a high level is going to be really key for him and really key for the Blue Devils. So I'm excited to see it. I'm glad that it was a focus for him, and it sounds like his family was a part of it. So that's really good. But looking ahead at the season, Duke doesn't really. I mean, yes, Mark Williams is a freshman center who's 7 feet tall and true center size. But Duke is going to have a lot of minutes this year where it's Hurt and Johnson playing, alternating, playing deep in the post and playing outside. Having big size among those two guys is going to be really key.
And really, when you're talking about Matthew Hurt, one thing that stuck out to me, or a couple of things really, he mentioned, we talked about this back in, I want to say May or early June, when the Brotherhood had one of the Nolan Smith podcasts with a lot of the current players on it. And he mentioned that he had access to a gym and that he was lucky that he had access to a gym. So clearly he's been taking advantage of that during the pandemic. But also, and I'm not saying anything that you guys don't already know or anyone out there doesn't, but I'll say it anyway. When you shoot 50,000 shots, I don't care in what period of time, and your arms don't fall off, they become stronger. And so that means that we're going to see him. That means it's repetition for him. And really, I hope, I know he was probably doing it in situations that mimic what he will see on the court during the season. And hopefully that means that his shooting percentage will go up, because if his shooting percentage goes up to shooting threes from, 40%, then that means he is going to be a problem for other people to deal with. Jason, what did you have on Matthew Hurt and just, how his shooting is going to relate to the rest of the rotation this year?
So to me, it's not as much the shooting as it is the size, because Matthew Hurt at 215 pounds was not able to play in the post effectively. And I mean, defensively, getting rebounds, things like that. Matthew Hurt's rebound rates last year were not good. And part of that was he was just physically pushed around by other big men. And Coach K, as we all know, loves to play his 5 best players. That is what Coach K does. And he often says there are no positions. He wants to put his 5 best guys out there. And I'm telling you right now that his 5 best guys will probably not include Patrick Tapeh or Mark Williams, who are the two sort of centers on the roster. They're the two guys who you naturally say, these guys play in the post, defensively they play center, they rebound, that's their role. I think both those guys can contribute in other ways, but they're not among the 5 best players in this Duke team. I don't think that's controversial to say. So if Coach K wants to put his 5 best players on the floor, someone has to guard the opposing team center. Someone has to play at least a little bit in the post. And everyone was wondering, is Jalen Johnson as a freshman going to be able to do that? Didn't really feel like it. Matthew Hurt at 215 pounds, we thought, I don't know how he's going to do that. Well, Matthew Hurt at 240 pounds, whole different conversation. So I think this opens the door for Coach K to play the lineup that he really wants to, which I think is probably either Jordan Goldwire or Stewart or Roach or Joey Baker. Those 4 guys, I think, sort of are perimeter players, along with Wendell Moore, Jalen Johnson, and Matthew Hurt. I don't think it's controversial to say that I expect those guys to be, some set of those to be the 5 best players, and that Hurt, Moore, and Johnson are for sure going to be among them. So the fact that this guy can play at 240, that's a big deal for Duke, because it just gives us more versatility and allows us to use Matthew Hurt defensively against a big center, but offensively moving all around and taking that big center away from the basket.
So I think the key here is not necessarily that Matthew Hurt's strength and his size now is going to allow him to start. I think it's going to allow him to finish. And I think it's going to allow Coach K to have those guys that you mentioned, Jason, that preferred 5 or preferred 6, that they're all going to be on the court late in the game when we need them the most. And if, last year there were times where Matthew Hurt would have a great game, but we had to sub him out late in the games because his frame just wouldn't allow us to, keep him in there for rebounding purposes, whatever. But at 240, he's wearing down the other guy. And the other guy is going to be tired at the end, and that's where he can shine. He shoots well from the line. He can rebound well, and at 240, he should be able to pull down 5-6 rebounds a game if he, especially late in the game when we need every possession to count and every defensive stop to matter. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out. And really, like you said, if he's going to be a guy that's 240 and shooting well, there's going to be no reason for him to not play 30, 35 minutes, because there's going to be no opportunity for Coach K to say, maybe we could take him off. He's going to make himself stay on the court, which I really love.
God, is it great to talk about real, actual basketball, guys?
It really is. It really is.
Donald, please tell me that we have more of it coming up after the break.
We do. You know what? Coming up next, Wendell Moore takes on a new challenge, and Jason gets to ask me a few questions about it. We will talk about all of that after a brief break. We are back on the DBR podcast. We want to move on next to Wendell Moore. Last Monday, Duke basketball announced that the sophomore forward was one of 11 players named to the first ever advisory committee for the National Association of Basketball Coaches. The NABC intends to seek input from this group on issues related to the sport. And on Thursday, Moore conducted a Zoom press conference to discuss exactly that. And Jason was able to participate and get some audio. So Jason, I'm going to toss it to you. What did we learn from Wendell during that interview? And just tell us a little bit about what you saw during this press conference.
So it was another one of these press conferences. These are a lot of fun, and I'm thrilled that Duke, the Duke Sports Information Department, allows me to participate in these, along with a bunch of other reporters from around the country. We all get to ask different questions of the players, and Wendell, was the focus of this one because of him being on this NABC player development coalition. That's what they're calling it. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you folks listen to the interview. A couple of the reporters introduced themselves before their questions, but just know that these are all national reporters who cover Duke basketball. The conversation really, the snippets you're going to hear starts talking about the player coalition that Wendell's a part of. And then we kind of move into a couple other topics, including what he's seen from his teammates thus far this year early in practice. But here's the interview that I did, and a few other reporters did just a couple days ago with Wendell Moore.
what leadership skills do you think that you've been able to attain, during your college years at Duke that will help you with this new position that you have been appointed?
I probably feel like just for me, just a chance to use my voice more. Coach always wants to be more vocal on the court, and having an opportunity like this just allows me to do that. I mean, this year I'm considered an upperclassman, but I'm still a sophomore, considering we have 7 new guys on our team. So I really just all that together helps me become a better leader in a whole.
Hey, Wendell, Jim Sumner. You're trying to get some more specifics about this. What subjects do you want to see addressed by this NABC council? How do you see it playing out? What's the end game? Will there be a report? Will it be more informal suggestions? Just, kind of get into the weeds a little bit and tell us what you want to see happen.
I mean, obviously, this is just the start of something special. We're kind of like the experiment group of guys to hopefully this become a larger thing and hopefully kind of map it out to be kind of like the NBA Players Union. We kind of just want to have an input in everything that goes in with the college basketball, whether it's how we play our games, how many games we play, the money that goes into it, what happens to the players, what happens to everything. We just want the players to get treated fairly so they don't feel like lose kind of interest in their sport early. That way, you see guys going to the G League and things like that. We just want to have an opportunity to keep guys in college because college is obviously a one-in-a-lifetime experience, and we want to make it that way for all athletes.
What were specific things you wanted to work on this offseason in preparation for this year?
I would probably say the biggest thing for me wasn't so much like my physical abilities or my ball handling, my shooting, my dribbling. I think for me, it was more of a mindset thing. Just getting into my own headspace where I can ultimately play the game how I want to play at my speed, at my pace. Just developing a confidence that I felt that I was missing last season, ultimately to make me a better player in the long run.
Jason Evans, Duke Basketball Report. A couple questions for you, somewhat related to COVID and trying to figure out how to play a college basketball season. There's been a lot of talk lately about the notion of perhaps putting college basketball teams into a bubble, like for conferences and then for the NCAA tournament. Is that something that you've thought about at all? Have you spoken to any fellow players about it? What do you all think about that as a possibility? Even if it would maybe mean being isolated from everyone except for your team for several months.
I kind of feel like here it's kind of what we're doing now. Obviously, we have the money to do that. Some schools may not be as fortunate. And I can't speak for those schools again. But obviously, I think the idea of a bubble would be a really good idea just to isolate all the teams who want to play against each other in that bubble and keep things safe, keep away from the public, just kind of keep us in our own area where we're able to play the game the right way and safely.
So the follow-up that I had was related to the NABC committee. Wendell, have you talked at all to either teammates or other players about the issues that you specifically want to bring up? Have you been in communication with anybody since sort of this was announced for you? Because I'd love to know what the entire basketball community is sort of saying to you about the things that you should talk about as you represent all of them.
Yeah, Def, I've been in contact with a lot of my friends I have around the country in college basketball, and more specifically, I've been in contact a lot with our team. And obviously, the first thing everybody wants to say is money, money, money. Everybody wants to get paid from this, and that's a good thing. But also, the main focus is, again, playing college basketball and how it's going to be played, and if it's going to be played safely, where we can make it through a whole – it might not be a whole season, but however long the season's going to be, we want to make it the whole season with no stoppage. So we don't want to have to start playing, then stop, take a break, and maybe pick it back up or things like that. So really everybody's main focus is just getting on the court. I know everybody's hungry to play. They've been waiting almost a half year to play, so I know they're itching to get out on the court, and that's the main thing that we're focusing on right now.
Wendell, getting back to what's been going on in practice, I guess you guys have been practicing for a couple of weeks now. Can you just tell me, who's surprised you so far? Who's either among the freshmen or Patrick the transfer or among the returning guys? Is there anybody that you go, wow, I didn't know that guy could do this or that, or who's impressing the most right now from what you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like as I said before, we haven't really had any like live action stuff yet, so I can't really speak on what guys doing against each other in practice, things like that. But just the workouts I've seen, I've been amazed at the way that every guy on this team can shoot the ball. Even our bigs can stretch the floor, hit the three, and they've been very consistent making those shots. So yeah, I'd probably say that's the thing that I'm most impressed about our team so far.
So I don't know how much you heard it on that in those little snippets, but one of the really interesting things to me that Wendell talked about was his own personal confidence. And he brought this up a couple times in the interview, and I didn't have time to really include a lot of sound bites about it, but he said he needed the game last year. He needed the game to slow down a bit for him, and that he needed more confidence in his own game to play better. He also talked a little bit about being injured last year. Remember, he missed the entire month of January. I think we forget about that, and that it impacted his. He'd never had an injury that had impacted him over such a long course of time, and that it was sort of lingering with him throughout the rest of the season. He really feels much more confident coming into this year. He understands his role as a leader. He knows what he needs to work on and what he needs to get better at. He says the game has slowed down for him some, and you get the impression that he's very eager for the season to start because he knows that there are big things ahead for him, and he's very, very excited about that. He's also obviously very excited about his teammates. Guys, what did y'all hear that you thought was most interesting in the conversation with him?
I thought it was notable that he, when asked about what is the committee looking for, he said money, money, money. I think showing the hand a little bit on what the top players are looking for. And as we've said, I think the thing that's going to be most contentious about all of the discussion about player advocacy and player rights and all this stuff is that there is not an unlimited, untapped pot of money out there that the players are suddenly going to have access to. The money is going to come from somewhere else. And as we're seeing around the country, lots of schools, more schools announcing this week that they're shuttering non-revenue sports programs. All of that is going to accelerate in the world where the donations and the marketing dollars and all of that isn't necessarily going to the athletic department and is going to the specific athletes. So it's neat that he's on the committee, and it's neat that they've got representation. I think they've got pretty good representation across different geographies, and not all the players are from the most high major programs, but I think it's certainly overrepresented of the high major programs. So the issues that are most important to players at Duke and Kentucky are not the same issues that are important to players at other schools. Those tensions are going to arise at some point, and this is the starting point.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to mention, he made it very clear that Coach K had selected him for this role, and that essentially there were 11 prominent coaches across the country who I think had been tapped by the NABC to select players to be a part of this. Just so everybody knows, it's Wendell Moore from Duke. North Carolina's Armando Bacot is one of the players. Colorado has a player. Kentucky's Keon Brooks. Harvard has a player. So Tommy Amaker selected someone. Villanova, Gonzaga, Michigan State, Texas Christian, TCU, Syracuse, and High Point. High Point, kind of a strange inclusion there.
So looking there, you're overrepresented on programs that win national championships, make Final Fours, all that kind of stuff.
And from
there
North
are
Carolina.
three there and from North Carolina, because there are 3 North Carolina schools in that list. Although I don't know that High Point is winning national championships, but you never know. That certainly things could change. Davidson had Steph Curry, and they almost made a Final Four. So anything could happen at any time. But that list of schools is overrepresenting on the players that I don't want to say that they feel aggrieved, but the players that probably have the most potential to earn money by playing college basketball, and not a ton of representation from the 95+% of schools that don't have any of these recognizable players, the kinds of kids who, yes, maybe they could get some kind of, personal advertising revenue because they're doing pizza shops in their town, in their college town, but not much farther out from there.
Yeah, but you've got, player from Colorado, player from High Point, we've mentioned Harvard, TCU. I mean, these are not national title contenders, and they're going to have voices on this committee. And let's be clear that this committee is not making grand decisions. What they're going to try and do is give recommendations. They're going to try and, sort of come up with things that they would really like, that they think represent all of college basketball, all college basketball players, present them to the coaches, because this is a committee formed by the NABC, the National Association of Basketball Coaches, and then hopefully have the coaches present them to the president and the administrators and the such. Look, I don't know that there's going to be a lot accomplished by this committee, but at least it's beginning to give players a voice. And if players are able to speak, look, if Wendell or one of the other guys in this committee is able to stand up and say, hi there, I'm speaking on behalf of these other guys who represent, hundreds of players across the country, and we think X, it carries more weight than anything the players have been able to do in the past. And that's
why I thought it was interesting that someone, I don't know if it was you, Jason, or somebody else, asked Moore about who he's talked to. I think you might have brought this up. Who has Wendell Moore talked to? Because certainly it's not just the Duke guys that he knows. He knows the other players that he played against on AAU, who are probably all at prominent programs. But in high school, he probably played with a lot of players who are not high major players, who played throughout Division I and even lower division college basketball. And presumably he's still friends with some of those people. And I would think the same is the case for all the guys in this committee. They are talking not just to their own teammates. So Moore obviously talks a lot to his Duke friends, but he has friends he played with growing up, and they also are representing sort of a part of the constituency that you would think he's representing on this committee. That's the part of it that is most intriguing to me, because that's where the fault lines are going to appear when these discussions start to break down.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing that stood out to me. There's a couple things, but that one was one. The fact that a lot of these players from the bigger schools have that expansive network that they can tap into, not just with AAU, but with high school people they grew up with, people that they went to college with, people that they've known throughout the conference. I mean, it's not like our guys aren't talking to UNC players and UNC players are talking to NC State players. They all know each other very well. And you want to be able to use that network to get a nice base or a well-rounded balance of what people are thinking. And it's not just what people think in North Carolina, because what people think in North Carolina is different than what people may think in Texas, which is why you have these guys from all across the country, and hopefully we'll be able to create give a better sense. And really, when it comes to the committee being formed now, they're setting the wheels for the next one. I mean, it's not like we need to expect Wendell Moore to walk in there and start, breaking tables and kicking people out of boardrooms. These guys are going to lay the groundwork for the next group that comes in, and they're going to take that and build upon it. But the one thing that I also want to note that stands out is that Coach K picked him. That tells me that Coach K values his leadership. He values what he brings to the table and thinks that that is something that should be represented on a national level. And I think that speaks volumes about what Coach K thinks of Wendell Moore from a leadership standpoint, but also the kind of kid that Wendell Moore is, because he's going to be able to take that knowledge and take that confidence that he was talking about in the interview and bring that to the national level.
Odds that Wendell Moore becomes a sophomore captain on this team this year?
75%.
Pretty high.
I think it's basically guaranteed at this point.
One more thing I want to mention just really, really quick. Look, I know Wendell Moore has aspirations of playing in the NBA, and we know that it was considered after his freshman year, and I think it's probably pretty likely that he goes after his sophomore year. But it would be really great if some of the guys on this committee were able to stay for a couple of years and build on whatever it is that happens with them. I'm not saying that there's any type, that this means Wendell Moore is going to lean toward coming back or anything like that. But it'd be really great if he was able to take what he learns in year one and still be there in year two.
Continuity is a wonderful thing when it comes to starting committees. I know, by example, having started a couple, you want to have someone on there that knows what the trials and tribulations you went through the year before, so that the year after is not as as more easy sailing. But it doesn't necessarily have to be Wendell Moore. But I feel like some of those guys on the committee are in that same boat where they're thinking, okay, if a couple of us can take this knowledge and pass it on directly to the next group, we'll be in a better spot than we were today.
And if Coach K wanted a guy who was only going to be on the committee for 1 year, he would have picked Jordan Goldwire in all likelihood. So who knows? Maybe this means something.
To close out, we did want to touch on some comments that Coach K made last Tuesday about the NCAA tournament. He was on the new Keyshawn, Zubin, and Jay Will radio show. Yes, that is our own very Jay Will on ESPN. And they were discussing how the COVID-19 pandemic could affect this upcoming season of college basketball. And Coach K basically said that the NCAA simply can't afford to lose out on another NCAA tournament. I'm going to quote him directly from the show because it's important that we hear what he actually said. He said, quote, "We're the thing that the NCAA is most concerned about because men's college basketball and the tournament pays for something like 98% or more of the money for the NCAA. We need to have the tournament. We can't have it where 2 years in a row you don't have the NCAA tournament." Now, to be clear, Coach K was not saying that college basketball must proceed at all costs. That is what a lot of people on Twitter were saying. It was quite the contrary. He's asking for the NCAA to do something it has rarely done during this pandemic: show leadership. He wants things to be safe. He was asking the NCAA to see to it that their players can participate in college basketball in the safest possible environment. Sam, I want to start with you. Give me your thoughts. Is Coach K right? Is the NCAA in trouble if they can't pull a college basketball season complete with the NCAA tournament together this year?
Definitely, because the NCAA tournament is where all the money for the NCAA comes from. So I don't think anything about what Coach K said is really surprising when you think about what the organization is and what it does. Because
Sam, we should remind folks that college football is its own sort of separate entity in terms of the postseason and the money that's generated by it. That's right. It's not like the NCAA. There's a reason that the bowls are not called the NCAA bowls. There's a reason that the championship series that we have is not called the NCAA College Football Championship. The NCAA has nothing to do with that and does not take in money from that. The NCAA gets its money from the basketball tournament.
Right. So you can think of the NCAA as being an umbrella organization for all the schools and conferences that administers some, but not all, specifically not the Division 1A football, the FBS championship, but it administers everything else. It does oversee eligibility of football players. So it's not like the NCAA has nothing to do with football, but it doesn't make money from the football games the way that it does from the basketball tournament. That's the number one revenue generator for the NCAA. It runs all the championships, and so that's where its money comes from. So if the NCAA can't pull off something of a basketball tournament this year, it is going to be big trouble for the folks who work there, but also for the schools that can't get that payout money. We've talked about how the bowl season is important for dollars, and the football regular season is important for schools to get paid, but the NCAA tournament is a big part of that. So I don't think what Coach K said was particularly surprising, other than the fact that he came out and said it. And we know that he doesn't like to speak publicly on issues very often, but he said, this is the time for real leadership. This is the time for creativity. This is the time for the NCAA to really think about how they can administer the tournament and what is going to bring eyeballs to TVs for the tournament. And if that means they have to bubble the players up for a few weeks to do it, that has to be an option. A lot of the student athletes are at schools that are going online anyway. So what's the difference if you're, taking classes in Durham or taking classes in a bubble in Florida? This is the time when they have to be creative, because honestly, a lot of these, not Coach K, but a lot of these other folks, their jobs are on the line if they can't figure out how to make this thing work safely this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bubble aspect of things. Calipari was on the same show. He had mentioned that players or teams should consider having a bubble. Wendell Moore in his interview, Jason, I don't know if you picked this up, but he also mentioned that for the most part, the guys don't interact with anyone outside of the basketball program at this point. I mean, obviously things could change now that classes are starting up this week, but for the most part, he's saying that, they haven't seen anybody but the basketball team, and that is in itself a little bit bubble. But one thing that Coach K did mention that I think is important when people look at the headline and say, oh, Coach K just doesn't care about safety. He mentioned that he does not care when the NCAA tournament is. And I'll quote again. He said, I think you should start. I think that's where you should start. Make sure you have the tournament. It doesn't make any difference when it is, because we don't even know when the NBA season is going to be next year. And we should look at them to see how they navigate the waters going forward. They've navigated them really well with the bubble. And I think what he means is the NBA season has been usually what the NCAA tournament works itself around. The draft, the combines are all based around that. Now we have a situation where the NBA finals for this year won't end until October 12th. And now they're considering their proposed start of the season was December 1st, but now they're considering delaying the NBA start of the season even further. Also, the same thing with the draft. They're considering all these things this week. So what will happen to college basketball? There's no need for college basketball to end in March if they're not going to have a draft or another season until next October or next November. Why sit there and rely on the same timetable that we've worked on before? We're in a new world now. So maybe, if the NCAA tournament needs to be delayed until May, June, then maybe do that, because if we're able to get a college basketball season in safely, I think that works well for everyone involved. Obviously, safety is the primary concern here, but I think when it comes to Coach K, he's just looking for someone in the NCAA to say, okay, we are taking all these steps. Here's what we're going to do. And so far, he has to speak up because no one else is doing it.
And the last thing I want to point out, and Sam alluded to this, but I want to put it in hard terms of dollars. $867 million. That's how much money the NCAA tournament, the basketball tournament, generated in revenues in 2019. $867 million. If putting players in a bubble and testing them and, doing all kinds of other, stuff to ensure the safety of the process cost you, okay, 100, 200 million to get that 867 million, it's worth it. They're going to figure out a way to do this. I am absolutely convinced of that. It is too important to the future of the NCAA. It's too important to the future of college basketball. And it makes too much financial sense. They're going to figure out a way to do it. I'm absolutely sure of it. My bet is we're going to see sort of little mini bubbles along the way, that we'll see conference bubbles. We may see sort of mini tournament bubbles. I could see some. John Calipari talked about the notion of taking the teams in the Champions Classic, which Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State, Kansas, take them, put them in a bubble for a week. You do some testing, you put them all together. Maybe they play 2 games rather than 1 game against each other. And then that bubble breaks up. They go back to different places and we form new bubbles with new sets of teams together. I think you're going to see that kind of thing happening across college basketball. And then eventually we will make our way to a tournament. Donald, I think you're right. I think the timing, it may not be March, it may be May. And who knows what the world will look like then. But I think they'll do everything they can to have it, because they have 867 million reasons to pull it off.
And I think when it comes to the ACC, to close it out, the ACC might be in the best position of anybody to create said bubble, because they have the Greensboro Coliseum, which is not used by anyone, but is basically, if you think about it, is the de facto center of the Atlantic Coast Conference. So I think when it comes to that, the Big Ten doesn't have like a gym that they can use. They use NBA gyms. SEC uses NBA gyms to conduct their tournaments. But when it comes to the ACC, they can always rely on Greensboro to have a neutral site that everyone can play their games in for an entire season. Now, will it be something that they do it in an entire bubble, like they're doing like the Wubble for the WNBA? There's also the fact that like Aussie Rules Football is doing phases, where they have phased bubbles and they do it for like 5 weeks here, 5 weeks there, but they're still in bubbles, but they're, like Jason said, they're just moving from bubble to bubble. There's ways to do this. And it sounds like we will know by the middle of September how they're going to proceed, at least the NCAA's proposal on how they're going to proceed. So we'll look forward to seeing that at that time frame, but it's going to be interesting to see how they come up with a plan, because it seems like if they don't do it, the teams will, because the teams are not going to sit back and rest and allow the NCAA to force another cancellation of a season.
And by the way, if you did Greensboro as a central hub for the ACC, you could potentially play games in Winston-Salem, in Durham, in Chapel Hill, in Raleigh. Those are all very easy driving distance. They're all less than an hour from Greensboro. So if you want, you may even see the ACC suggesting to several conferences, we can come together and we have places that are around here that are easy places where we can play basketball games. Remember, basketball, much easier in terms of footprint to pull off games than it is a football field that is a much larger facility.
And if there's going to be no fans, which I assume if there's going to be a bubble, there will be no fans, then you even have UNC Greensboro, you have NC-A&T, you have a bunch of, North Carolina has more gyms than people, it seems. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities.
Where's High Point? High
Point is right there.
Also there in the triad.
Yeah, they're also right there. So it really, you were going to have options for the ACC, and college basketball will benefit from having a season. But again, let's see what the NCAA comes up with. And that will do it for us on episode number 225 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Listen, guys, if you have questions for us, please send us an email to dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We keep requesting them, and if you ask them, we will find a way to answer them on a future podcast. We also accept all topic suggestions as well. Until next week, we thank you all for listening. And for Jason Evans on the Jersey Shore and Sam Klein in Boston, I am down the line temporarily in Texas. Stay safe in these streets, ladies and gentlemen, and we will leave you with the Duke Band to take us home.